welcome to day 3 here at Stripe Sessions, otherwise known as the final day.
Woo.
I'm joined by James Bezic here. James, how are you holding up on day 3?
Great, great. It's been a really busy week, Ben.
Yeah, have you got enough caffeine in the system, ready to power through?
Almost.
So yesterday was packed. There was so much going on, lots of breakouts, lots of keynotes, so much happening in the expo hall. Let's start with that, actually, the expo hall. Is there any standout things in the expo hall that you think people need to come and check out before they leave?
So overall, I think the expo hall is just very different from most tech conferences. So you and I were here last year on the customer side, and it's night and day compared to last year. It's several times larger, but I think it has some really unique things going on as well that are well worth checking out. So one is in the vendor corner. In the far corner, they've got 5 different local vendors showing how they use Stripe to power their businesses. And there's a few interesting ideas there, including an AI bird feeder and an interesting game that you can get for your kids, and there's a chocolate vendor and other things. But I think it's also great for developers just to see the real-life impact of what these things look like when you use them in real life.
Yeah, well, what I like about that, actually, is there's not many other conferences where you can invite a whole pop-up version of a business just to run. And it's relevant to the conference because they're all obviously running on Stripe, and if you want to buy something that they're offering, right, that's done through one of their Stripe payment implementations. So I think that's really unique, you know, little showcase.
And actually, even from there, behind us, we've then got the unified commerce area.
Yeah.
So there's a whole selection of terminals. There's 20 or 30, I think, over there, with an example of different types of large-scale businesses, whether it's hotels or grocery stores, of how you would implement payments using these. And actually, we had Andrew Robinson, one of the SAs over there, on the show yesterday to talk about how this all works. Actually, a fascinating topic in itself. We get a real hands-on experience in how that works exactly just on the expo hall. And then you look a bit further afield, you've got all these other vendors here in the payment space, from Amazon Pay to AWS to Visa, Klarna, Clerk, and many others as well. And I've been around here and learned quite a lot myself.
So how does Amazon Pay plug into the Stripe ecosystem?
I mean, Amazon Pay uses Stripe, so that's one of the big surprises for many people. And obviously, Amazon has just a massive amount of volume on Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Prime Day, and all the other parts they use. And they needed a reliable partner with this. So obviously, Stripe's reliability numbers, as we learned from the keynote, are now at 6.9. So there's probably a clue as to why they're big partners of Stripe. But they're a diamond sponsor here. So I think Amazon Pay and Stripe are very tightly connected.
I want to go back to the unified commerce expo that you mentioned, that booth. So do they have different implementations of the terminal in the 5 or 6 different types of business that they're showcasing? Is that what it is?
Yeah, and in fact, Andrew was talking about just how this has simplified the whole idea of bringing hardware into the operation. Because if you remember not too long ago, if you went to a business and you ordered online but you returned in store, you'd often have a very disconnected experience where credits and refunds are very hard, and it felt like 2 different businesses. And this is about bringing it together, but providing customers with a very frictionless experience on the front end.
So that's that problem where you bought something online, you go in and they say, which credit card did you use, and they can't find it.
Right. And he was talking about, when you bring in tap to pay versus when you type in your credit card number on a website.
Yeah.
From a developer point of view, how do you then match those customers? Because it's really 2 random pieces of data that are separate.
Yeah.
Now with these systems in the back end, you can have a complete view of which customer we're talking about while being secure at the same time.
I see, okay. So what about other things on the expo hall? Is there anything else that's maybe slightly aside, unusual things that you've seen around?
Well, some of the interesting ones, there's a headshot booth at the back that's been very popular, so if you need a new LinkedIn profile.
I've seen your LinkedIn has been updated, yeah.
I decided to do that one. That was good.
Yeah.
But also, even just unusual things like a meditation section at the back. So in the partner booth yesterday, I saw there was an opportunity for a 20 or 30 meditation phase, which actually at a tech conference is a really good idea given everything going on. So I do think there are lots of unusual things here. And it's not so massive you get lost, but you can spend a good couple of hours walking around and trying all these different things.
Sure. Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit. Yesterday there were a whole number of talks, so many different talks and different tracks. There was the product keynote, there was the developer keynote, there was the whole developer track. Are there any particular talks or announcements that stand out to you from that?
I mean, I think the general theme, if you try to put it all together this year, for developers, AI is obviously just everywhere, but it does have relevance to this space, and it can make us more productive. I think there are lots of meaningful additions from everything from the way it was put into the docs to the automatic dispute resolution ideas, and that you can just see how it can improve our lives as developers in many, many ways. So I think underlying everything, that was a very strong theme in this space. Stablecoin was another big factor you're starting to see coming through, and Patrick referenced how this is such an enormous force coming into the industry. And the reality is, I think this is very new for all of us. That most developers won't know anything about stablecoins. Alison Farris was on the show yesterday with a PM from stablecoins, giving a really good overview, well worth checking out to sort of establish how you can use it and what it means for us. But those are really the underpinnings of the whole conference, I would say.
I noticed the third theme, more for developers though. It seems to be a theme of extensibility growing. Like it started maybe 2 years ago, I think it was, when Stripe introduced Stripe apps, right? And then last year they grew on that with insiders and like sort of forum for developers to get the inside track on beta releases. Was that stripeinsiders.com? Stripe.insiders.com?
Insiders.stripe.dev.
Insiders.stripe.dev, okay. Yeah, and this year it seems like they've grown on that whole theme of extensibility, right? With things like workflows. I know there's some updates on event destinations, Stripe organizations.
Yeah.
You can now, that's gone GA, I think, actually, Stripe organizations, right?
I mean, I think looking at what David Richardson said in the product keynote yesterday and all these other things we've heard, Stripe totally accepts the reality that for businesses, they're using lots of payment providers, they're using lots of other software, there's legacy systems and everything else. And unlike the old days of IT and software where you have to put everything with one vendor, it's very open to the fact that you're not going to change these things, you just need to make them work together. So I think this extensibility model makes it much easier for developers. And I think we're going to see a lot coming up this year from Stripe that really continues that theme as well.
Yeah, I agree. It's way more realistic. Like, we know that developers are not just building with one type of SaaS provider or one partner. If you want to plug in some sort of money movement, then you're going to want to use Stripe, we think, right? But if you're going to want to plug in, I don't know, identity access or API management or databases, then you're probably going to use different providers, right? And you need a way to orchestrate and extend across all of those different things.
Yeah, I think we're just at the beginning of this journey, but it makes a lot of sense with payments, I think. Money's a complicated topic. It's not like centralizing your SaaS providers for other things. Often when you've established where your money is in your business, it's hard to move. And so I think this provides a lot of extra tooling for developers to simplify it's reporting and extending your own software and capabilities as well.
So you chatted with a lot of people at Stripe yesterday. Is there anything maybe that flew under the radar that you think is worth sharing that perhaps wasn't on one of the big product announcements?
I think most of the time when I speak to the people coming in, you find that there's just a lot more activity than you realize in terms of the thought level at every point. I mean, I think one of the great ones yesterday, the Cursor CEO, when he came in, talked to us.
In this room, right?
In this room, spoke to us 15 minutes. What was interesting to me about that is that, we've all seen Cursor and similar types of products and that nature. And we want to get under the covers. Well, what are they thinking about? We know they're not perfect at this point. Where is it going? I think he had a really interesting view and roadmap on what this looks like for developers for the next year. And so that, to me, was fascinating. I just thought they're really insightful and they've got a clear goal of where they want to get to. And it's not so much about replacing developers, which is a theme we've heard from many cloud providers over the last year. It's more about really putting us on rails. Like, how fast can we move with this stuff? So I thought it was exciting. On the Stripe side, I think when you talk to the PMs and get into learn how they're building, it's the same sort of thing. You realize the breadth of thought going into releasing and building these products.
So he was one of the many interviews that we did, one of the many talks we did in this room yesterday. We had, I don't know, maybe 10 different conversations, 10 different people that we had in. Yeah. Maybe we should recap a little bit, because I think these will be available online for people to dive in further, right, on YouTube.
They're on YouTube.
They're already up there.
Stripe.dev.
So the first one I think I saw was with you and Michel Bou about API v2 and you. Can you tell us a little bit about what you went into with Michel?
Yeah, so API v2 is a theme at the conference in a couple of sessions, and it's been around for a little while, but obviously there's a bit of mystique around this because people are wondering about, well, do I have to move from version 1 to version 2 and all this sort of thing. And Michelle helped explain, you're perfectly fine staying on version 1, but version 2 provides all these extra capabilities that can really simplify your life as a developer. But since Michelle's such a big figure at Stripe and has been here 12 years and really seen it go from a much smaller company to where it is today, I wanted to get her a take on what she thinks about APIs and how you build with that sort of scale and how you make sure it stays reliable and easy to use. And so a lot of our conversation was about that. And I think that's incredible because in most companies, as they grow, they have teams of people that change over this period. And so there's no single line of thought from beginning to end. And Michelle really has that institutional knowledge. So I think it's just extraordinary to hear what her thoughts are around API design.
Yeah, there's not many people that have grown with the company from, the first 10, 20 employees to be so huge and are still building out like what the industry sees as one of the leading resources, which is, Stripe APIs is probably the thing that developers ask me about most is like, when they come to our meetups, is they just want information on how to emulate our APIs or our documentation. So it's great that we can get that insight from her.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that came to me from the conversation was, as a developer before I worked here, I used Stripe, and it always struck me how clean the APIs and documentation were years ago. And I was interested to know how that was considered, because often when you're a startup, that's a lot of work. You don't necessarily want to invest the time in that. But it's very clear at Stripe that they really agonized over that at the point long before we were here to make sure that every decision around every attribute and every call was well thought out before it was released to developers. So yeah, definitely well worth listening to what Michelle had to say.
And even now, right, that the V2 is being released, they're not forcing customers to migrate onto V2, are they?
No, there's absolutely not. You don't need to change anything if you don't want to.
Right.
But I'd also suggest learning about what it offers. So there was a dev track session yesterday from 2 of the PMs on API V2.
That's right, yeah. So they covered in depth about how to migrate and what's in it for you, the developer.
Yeah, and that'll be on YouTube today, actually. So if you didn't catch it yesterday, you can watch it online.
What were 2 of the other dev track talks? Well, I know what one of them was. What was the other one?
So we also had TSE, which is the technical support group, and also MG, Michael Glukowski from the PM team, came to talk about what are the common issues they see customers run into and what's the best practices to solve them.
Now that was like a top 10 challenges that we see and how to fix it.
Yeah, and again, these are 30-minute talks, so they cram a lot of information into a very short space of time. But if you're building with Stripe, I think that's one that's well worth listening to. And actually, the third dev track talk that was really good was yours.
I hear the third one was amazing. Yeah, so that was with myself and Tanya Boiteau from the Stripe Workflows product team. Gosh, I've been saying workflows so much this week that I can't even deal with it. So yeah, we talked about Stripe Workflows, brand new product that's gone into public preview, which allows you to orchestrate pretty much all the Stripe API actions into step-by-step workflow with conditional logic. They run in response to events. There's no coding involved, nothing to provision or manage or patch. So it's just a much easier, simplified way of customizing and integrating into Stripe without having to write code.
Yeah. And I thought that was a really good session. And again, your YouTube video is available later today.
Oh, great.
So when there's a blog post of yours as well. So
yes, yeah, the blog post is very much based on the talk that we did, but with more hands-on examples on some of the things that we think developers will start building once they get back to their desk.
I mean, I think we all worked on workflows in our old jobs at AWS and serverless, and one of the best hand-in-glove use cases were payments.
Yeah.
And so the fact that now Stripe has workflows natively, I think will make developers' lives just a lot easier when you're dealing with some of these really tough issues around retries, error handling, idempotency, and things that are just tough to do in code by yourself.
Yeah, and touching on that, the fact that we were both here last year on a booth working for AWS, and I don't know about yourself, but I was so impressed by the event overall that it wasn't long after that I applied, right? Yeah. And so to be back a year later and talking about workflows on the stage was a really nice personal moment anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about what's coming up today, because it might be the last day, but we still have a pretty big schedule in the room here today, don't we?
Yeah.
So I've got a few of the talks coming up. So we're going to be talking about event destinations and extensibility in general, and that's with Trey Nugent, which is a PM on event destinations. But I think we also have Brooks joining us, who's one of the engineering managers of the whole of the extensions side of the org, right? So I get to do that one, so I'm really looking forward to hearing about where they think the future of extensibility in Stripe is going.
Yeah, I mean, both very strong in what they do, but Brooks has an extraordinary view of how events fit into what Stripe's doing, so I will be tuning into that one.
Okay, yeah, interesting. Okay, and then we're going to be talking about the Stripe community as well.
Yes. So basically, we've invested a lot here at Stripe into the community generally. So there's a community team that's been built up. And they've launched Stripe Startups yesterday, which is a brand new program for venture-backed startups. Absolutely enormous range of benefits for companies that want to apply. And Laura and Ashley, who are in that team, will be coming on to talk about what they think about community. And both of them have a long background in building communities and tech companies, but they'll also be talking about if you're building your own sort of community in your company, what you should think about. It's not entirely obvious. And obviously we work really closely with them because DevRel and community are fairly closely tied. But I think this is the real beginning of a very large Stripe community building. So the things we've been doing in the last 6 months with the meetup programs across the world, which we've seen just enormously popular in many cities, I think will get to be even bigger this year with the growth of the community.
Yeah, I've seen they've got some really sort of actually quite fun and interesting plans for people, haven't they?
Yeah.
Some events coming up.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we've got some other talks coming up as well, which look quite interesting. Let's talk about unifying business models. That's on Connect, right? And we'll be talking about pay-as-you-go, usage-based billing, and Stripe orgs and the new way of resource sharing across Stripe orgs as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's all of our talks for the rest of the day, right?
Yeah, I mean, UBB, usage-based billing, is absolutely something that developers should be aware of. It's been enormously popular. It's incredibly useful if you're in the AI or SaaS space in any capacity whatsoever. So that's one I'd definitely check out if you have any inkling that you're not charging for fixed price items.
Yes. Are there any particular questions that you want me to pose to the PM?
Well, I'm kind of interested in how the auth model works if you're growing in the amount of traffic, because if someone puts down a credit card and they're continuously increasing what they're spending, how does that work in the background? How do you know when you need to stop allowing access or you're getting declines? It seems like it's
so funny that that's your first question, because that was probably the most common challenge that we had when we were working on Lambda in the AWS space, right? Is that people's bills would, because it was a similar pay-per-use billing model, right? And people's bills would accidentally spin up sometimes without any way of capping that, really.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in that that's very tough, and so it's good to have your provider manage it for you.
Yeah.
It's not something you want to manage yourself. So I'm interested to hear what they have to say.
Okay, I will definitely see what they've got to say about that. So I think we shut down the expo hall about 3 p.m. today, right? But there's some stuff happening this evening where you can catch yourself and myself.
Yeah. So I think when you come to these conferences, it's really useful to think about what's going on beyond just the conference venue. It's the best way to meet developers and get some networking. And earlier this week, we went to the meetup at Mux, but tonight there's a meetup with PlanetScale and 11 Labs. And we'll all be going to this, but both really interesting companies with great products. And so I'm looking forward to meeting the devs there.
Yes, I may even do a lightning talk. They've asked me to do a talk, but on like 10 minutes notice, so I don't know. Hopefully there'll be time to do that. And of course, this Stripe Office Hours is in person for this week, but it's a weekly show, right? We do it online every week with a new guest for an hour, and we have live questions. And so this will continue after sessions. It's important for people to know, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's worth attending because it gives you an insight into what the PMs and software engineers and all the guests we bring on. You can ask your questions directly, and so it's a great way to get a line into Stripe, make your opinions known, and see what we're thinking. So we started this program about 3 months ago, and Cecil Phillip has been hosting it. And I tune in every week and learn a lot from all the different people. So although this is the first time in a live environment, we've done 17 sessions over the last 2 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, once we leave here, it goes back to regular programming each week.
Okay, wonderful. So we'll make sure the link's up on the video for that. Is there anything else that you want to make sure people don't forget to check out before we go offline and jump back into our session, our track for the day?
Well, definitely check out stripe.dev because
Okay.
we launched 4 blog posts yesterday that go into depth in many of the different topics that are released for developers. And so it's just worth reading those. They're not super long, but there's a lot of good detail in those.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. Well, James, thanks so much for joining us for the start of day 3, final day, and hope you have a good rest of sessions.
Thanks.
Cheers.